is up? I'm Jace, and today I'm going to be doing this review and summary of Ghost Quartet. If you don't know what Ghost Quartet is, it's a musical written by Dave Malloy. It's a song cycle. Specifically on the website, it's described as a song cycle about love, death, and whiskey. And this is accurate, but other than that, it doesn't really tell you what it's about. And for all the people that I've talked to about this show, a lot of people don't even know what it is. And people who do know what it is have no clue what it's about, which is understandable because this thing is a nightmare to try and unpack. And I did that. Mostly. I probably didn't get everything because there's a lot in the show. But I got a good amount that I think I can go over it and that all of you can understand what's going on because there's a lot. So, some background information. So, the show was written by Dave Malloy, and he also wrote a bunch of other shows such as Quartet, Moby Dick, Preludes. I believe he worked on Beowulf. I think that's another project that he did, and Great Comet. If you've heard of any of those, it's probably Great Comet because that's the one show of his that has been on Broadway. And it's personally one of my favorites. But if you've listened to any of the other ones, let me know how they are and I'll check them out. So this show premiered in 2014 at the Bushwick Star. And later in 2020, Dave Malloy posted the pro shot to YouTube of them performing it live at the McKittrick Hotel. And the soundtrack, the whole cast album, is also live at the McKittrick Hotel, which is really cool because you don't get live recordings with a lot of musicals. And so this is a really cool thing because you get to hear all the authentic stuff that's going on, and I really appreciate that. So, actors in this show. First off, we have Britton Ashford, and she's pretty well known for being the actress for Sonia in both the original and the Broadway cast of Great Comet. And she also is one of the few people who knows how to play an auto harp. If you go to the auto harp Wikipedia page, her name's on there. So, that's really cool. Auto harp is also a really cool instrument. She plays it throughout this show. All the actors play instruments as well as singing for this show, which is also really cool. Because, again, you don't get that a lot. It's very unique in that way. Next up is Gelsey Bell, and she is also known for being in Great Comet. She played Princess Mary in both the original and the Broadway cast. That's pretty neat. And she's also an opera singer, so we get some cool vocal stuff in this show. She does this technique called a vocal fry, and that technique is also used in one or two songs in Great Comet as well. So that will sound familiar to you if you're familiar with that show. We've got Dave Malloy. Yes, he did write the show, but he also acts. So he's in this show. He wrote the show. So he's a cool actor. He can play the accordion. He had to learn how to play the accordion for Great Comet, so there's that. And then finally we have Brent Arnold, and I actually didn't know who this guy really was. And I checked him out on IMDb, and he has a lot more music stuff that he's done for different shows rather than being an actor. So he's a little different in that regard. And throughout the show, he isn't as prominent as some of the other characters. He mainly plays the instruments. He has this whole rack of instruments around him, which you can tell if you watch the pro shot. Which you should do. But maybe understand this first. So, one more big piece of background before we actually get into the show. So, Dave Malloy took a bunch of different sources for the inspiration for the show. And there's a lot going on, but you have to know what is here. So, first of all, one of the inspiration, there's 4 or 5 different of these things. So one of the main things for inspiration here is this song called The Wind and Rain. It's like a folk ballad sort of thing from somewhere in Europe. I probably should have researched it, but I didn't. I think it's Scotland or something like that. So it's called The Wind and Rain, and so that's actually also the final song in this show. He modifies it to more fit him, but that's how it is. You modify stuff so it fits your story. But that's one of the big things in the show. Another thing is Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. That's another major thing that's in this show. It's this whole plot point thing. There's like 5 songs based around it. And it all fits into this as well. And then finally, another thing that's also really important, but not till the end of the show, is that he also takes 1001 Nights, also known as Arabian Nights. And if you don't know about that, that's important to like know what it is. So it's like all the Arabian fairy tales, you know, like Aladdin, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, that sort of thing. But the original part of it is that there's this king, or the Shah, and he was cheated on by his wife, and so he killed her. But he still wanted like love or whatever, so he would continue marrying women at night and then killing them in the morning. So then he would never like be cheated on again. That was his whole thing. So he chose to marry Scheherazade, and Scheherazade was like, aha, I have a plan. And she would tell stories during the night, but she wouldn't finish them. And so he'd have to keep her alive so he could continue hearing the story, because he liked stories. And she would come up with all these different stories and weave them all together so that they fit. And so Arabian Nights is like stories inside of stories, because she's the one telling all those stories, like Aladdin and Ali Baba. So that may not sound important right now, but like way later in this show, it gets to be like, oh, this is why this information is important. So, I'm gonna quick get into the characters, and then I'll get into actually going over the show. And if you're probably catching me looking down, I have all my notes here. I have like 10 pages of notes, because this show is absolutely insane. So, first off, all the characters, so there's multiple characters that each person plays, and all of them are individual characters, but they're also like the same person, because it has like multiple reincarnations and stuff. And also another thing to remember is for this show is that time doesn't flow linearly, so there'll be like 2 versions of the same person in the same time, but we're just hearing like different parts of the story. So obviously they aren't singing as both the characters at the same time in that time period, but multiple of them like kind of exist, if that makes any sense. So, first off, we have Britain for her characters, and she is Rose Red, Roxy Usher, Dunyazad, and the photographer are her 4 characters. And you don't have to worry about memorizing these all now, because I have them for each song and which character they are in each song, but I figured a brief summary would be good. So next up, Gelzy plays as shop owner, Pearl White, Scheherazade, the victim, Lady Usher, and Soldier. Dave plays as the astronomer, the subway driver, Mr. Usher, and then just David. He's just referred to as David throughout the show, so I guess he's like playing as himself, because Brent has the same thing. He's Bear, Pusher, Brent, and then he's the fool / the brother in the Usher story. I don't know why he's referred to as the fool, but that's what it said when I looked up his character on the Wikipedia page. And then he also plays Shah Zaman, which gets into the Scheherazade story later. Into side 1. There's 4 sides throughout this show, and they all differ in length, but let's just jump into it. So the first song is called I Don't Know, and this isn't any specific character, this is just kind of them as a group singing, and it says, so a lot of the lines refer to something important in this show. There's a lyric, someone that I used to be, someone that I will be, and someone that I am right now, which is, to me, very clearly about how this is a song cycle and how it doesn't flow linearly, which I kind of covered a few minutes ago. It also references 1001 Stories and Let Me Read You a Story, which is also implying that it's all being told by Scheherazade. That's one interpretation of it. Again, this whole thing gets more and more complicated, so you can see it as it's being told by Scheherazade, but you can also see Scheherazade as a character, and she knows about this stuff and is telling it. But we'll get to that later, because it's already getting confusing. So there's a line, play with all the voices in my head, which alludes to Roxy Usher, who claims to speak to her dead sister, Rose. Roxy and Rose are the same person. Yes. Anyway. And then there's also a line which is, now I ride the subway, which is alluding to one of the many lifetimes of Pearl. that sounds like a lot, and you probably didn't understand a good amount of it. But it makes sense when we get further into the show. And then, after I go through the show, you can go back to what I just said, and hopefully that'll make more sense to you. So, okay. The camera shop. So this show also is unique because it has like the songs, but then it also has a few scenes where it's speaking, and the camera shop starts off, it's like 2 minutes of speaking before it goes into a song. So Rose comes into this camera shop stating that she lost her camera, and the shop owner asks if it was stolen, but Rose replies that it was smashed and then the pieces were lost, so there's no way that it could be fixed. And they talk casually for a few minutes, and the shop owner invites Rose to have a drink. Then it goes into the song, and the shop owner starts singing about like her past and talking about an old fiddle that's on the wall that belonged to her great grandmother, which coincidentally is named Rose. And Rose is like kind of weirded out by this. She's like, "That's my name," and Pearl's like, "Yeah, it's so pretty, haha." And she goes on to say that it's made of the breastbone of Grandma Rose's sister, Pearl. So we're getting names. She then goes to tell the story of the two sisters, who Rose fell in love with this astronomer dude that lived in a tree house, and he stole her work, because she, like, looked at the stars and stuff, and he's like, "Yeah, let me make a note of that." And then he published it to an astronomy journal. And then he also fell in love with Pearl, which also did not help anything. Angry Rose went to a bear, of course, went to this bear and asked him to kill the astronomer and curse the sister. And the bear was like, "Of course, but only if you get these 4 items for me." And we have this little, Dave said that it's a reference to... I'm blanking on the name of the show. It's like the 4 items thing. It's like woods. It'll come to me later. I've seen this show too. Anyway, so Bear responded that he would, but only if she got 1 pot of honey, a piece of stardust, a secret baptism, and a photo of a ghost. Back in the camera shop, Rose is like, "No, this is absolutely insane." And the camera shop owner is like, "Don't you remember?" Which clearly Rose does not remember. And the song finishes out by saying, "Rose stole the honey from a soldier she pretended to love, stardust from an ancient she pretended to care. And for the baptism, she stole a baby from its mother, a frightened teenager in a mansion, and took the child into the sea, and the child was blessed." Kinda weird. Whole lot of weird. But that sets up this whole story for us. That sets up, like, a major thing. So the next thing is Star Child. It leads us directly into Star Child. So this child is the one from the secret baptism. So that's the first item on the list that's checked off already. So this song actually bothered me for a really long time. Because based on information that we get in later songs, we know that at some point Pearl had to be Rose's daughter. And this was the only plot line that it fit into. Yet, it's Rose's actress singing, and not Pearl. And I was really confused by this, and I actually messaged Britton Ashford on Instagram, and I was like, "Hey, what is going on here?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, so the 4 of us just decided that it didn't have to make sense. And that's that." And I was like, "Oh?" And she's like, "Yeah." She's like, "I have a chart for it around here somewhere." She never found the chart, I don't think, but that's what she told me. So, yeah, she just said it didn't have to make sense. However, I decided to, like, take a closer look, and I came up with, like, my own interpretation based on some of the lyrics. She sings, "But I will transcend and vomit this loser out of me," which could imply that in this lifetime, Pearl and Rose actually share a body. Rose seems to be the stronger of the two, and in almost all lifetimes depicted, she seems to hate her sister. So this portrayal of loser makes sense. Again, That's not necessarily canon. I came up with that myself, but it makes sense to me. And I know Brayton said that it doesn't have to make sense, but I feel like this at least kind of makes sense for the way that the rest of the story goes. So, Subway. This is one of my favorite songs on the soundtrack. It just sounds really cool, and it has some really cool harmonies in it. So this song by itself, you don't really get how it contributes to the story, but we see later that this is actually like a pivotal moment, essentially. I think it's a pivotal moment. So, it, like I said, it helps bring together pieces and characters. It connects to I Don't Know by telling us the victim is playing a game on her phone, and the same actress sings in I Don't Know. Now I ride the subway every night, playing with the games on my phone, which gives meaning to a previously meaningless line. And this entire song is about how the victim gets pushed into the subway tracks as the train comes by the pusher. That's what the character is called. And the one person who could do something, the photographer, does nothing. So, after that, we go into Usher Part 1. So this is The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, taking that, and Dave takes the story and he takes a lot of lines directly from the book and puts it into the musical, which is cool. Dave does that a lot. He also does that with Great Comet. Like, if you ever listen to Great Comet and if you're familiar with War and Peace, he quotes the crap out of it, which is awesome. I love that. His writing style is so unique because he'll like more just write the words and then he puts music to them afterwards. But it's more like poetry than everything. So there's not always like rhyming. There's hardly ever rhyming. Dave doesn't rhyme. Anyway, so Usher Part 1. We see them at like two main points in their lives, and it's specifically for Roxy. So we see two different songs where Roxy is 7 years old, and then 3 songs where she is 17. So Usher Part 1 is a 17-year-old period, and it specifically gives us a year for this one. It says in the year of 1873. It's important for demonstrating that time doesn't flow linearly in this world, which will make sense when I talk more later. But line doesn't flow linearly, so like they have knowledge of other stuff. So it's also important to note here that Roxy is specifically their only daughter. Like, they specifically say this in the lyrics, that their only daughter, Roxy, is dying because of the loss of her child, which is stolen. Yes, this is the child, Rose Pearl from Star Child. The father was an astronomer, sound familiar, who is long gone, ran off. We don't know what happened to him, but he is not here. But now we know more about like the secret baptism and how that was collected on the Bears list. But that's basically all that we see. Roxy is dying. Ushers are panicking. Yeah. Alright, on to track 6, which is Soldier and Rose. This one is very short and it doesn't connect as much of these, like, these character stories don't connect as much to other parts of the show like so many of these other songs do so far. So this is the One Pot of Honey from the Bears list, which Rose romances and subsequently kills. I'm pretty sure she kills her, but it's never specifically stated. But the soldier. So Rose romances / kills the soldier to get the honey. I don't know why the soldier has honey, but she has honey. I don't know why she had to kill her for it, but... And then track 7 is Any Kind of Dead Person, and it's primarily sung by Britten, with the other 3 as a chorus. And this song is just a bop. No matter how many times I listened to this musical, which has been a lot, let me tell you. I had to listen to it like probably 8 to 10 times just to even begin to understand what was going on. And that was like 2 years ago. So I've listened to it like a lot, and no matter how many times I look, I can't make sense of how this song actually fits into the plot. It's literally just a banger. That's it. There's nothing else. It's just a banger. I know it's already at like 20 minutes, but there's so much going on in this show, so it's probably going to be an hour. I'm sorry. Anyway, on to side 2. So, our first track in this side is The Astronomer, which is very much like a character scene. We see a little bit more of this dude. He's based in science, doesn't believe anything he can't prove, doesn't think ghosts are real. That's basically the gist of this song, is this dude, like, he's, like, kind of wishing he could be better, wishing he could sing. I'm sure there's some deeper meaning in that, but I didn't feel like analyzing it, because if I was also analyzing everything that was said, this video would be, like, 4 hours long. So, there is an important line, though, because it is referenced again later in the show, and there's a man in Iran who says he talks to ghosts, and the way that he does it is he hasn't spoke to anyone alive in 42 years. He turns his mind off every day and stares at the wall, and he is one with the universe and says that every soul that ever died is living in the shadows of the sky. So again, this is referred to later. Again, the line by itself is like, huh? But it's referred to later as another character, and that's why I'm referencing it now, because I think it is important. Okay, number 2. Family meeting! And this is only a spoken scene. So this is back to the Ushers. However, it's one of the instances where Roxy is 7, not 17. So, the family gathers and tells Roxy it's time to put her imaginary friend Rose away. Okay. Roxy is upset and insists that Rose is actually her dead sister. But remember we heard in Usher Part 1 that she is the only daughter. Okay. And Rose wants her to cross over because it's better over there, and they don't have computers and all of that crap. Remember, based on the time that we were given in Usher Part 1, this year would be 1863. So it's also demonstrating the lack of linear flow, which I mentioned earlier. That's basically all that happens in this short scene. She blows up at both her parents, but her mom especially. And her mom is Lady Usher, who is played by the same actress as Pearl. So remember that that's technically the same person. So there's some fighting stuff going on there. 4 Friends. Also another bop that has nothing to do with the plot of the show. I do remember looking at the Wikipedia page for this show when I first listened to it, because again, could not figure out what was going on. Wikipedia page was not helpful, but it described this song as personification of different kinds of alcohol. That's it. I don't know why this is here. It's a banger. I'm not gonna argue on that. It's good. But it doesn't help with the plot. So I'm gonna skip over this one. So, Fathers and Sons. This is a song between the Fool and Usher. Usher tells the Fool to leave because he can do better without Usher, who's like a rotten father or whatever. Fool says he'll play the cello, and this is a really important line here. He says, "If anyone pushes me, I'm gonna push them back." And you're like, oh, that's kind of... okay. But this is very important for later, and you're probably starting to make some connections on your own without me spelling them out for you, but we'll get to it as it makes more sense. So, Usher Part 2. Roxy draws closer to death. This is back when she's 17 years old, in case you couldn't figure that out from the context I gave you already. Her brother is still at home, so this is taking place before Fathers and Sons, but in, the soundtrack, it's after. So Roxy asks where her brother, sister, and her little girl are. Upon being told that her daughter is gone, she dies, and Lady Usher states, "Why did you have to die? I forgive you, oh Roxy, oh Roxy, oh Rose," which is intended to show that Pearl always has, some sort of memory of what is going on. She knows at least something. And so in the original Poe story, it's actually Lady Usher that dies. There isn't, kids or anything. I don't think there is. I haven't read the full story, I'll be honest. But I know that it's Lady Usher that's sick and everything, and she's the one that dies. And but in this story, it's Pearl that dies, and so, not Pearl, it's Rose that dies, Roxy. And Lady Usher elects to keep the body in the vault under the bedroom for a fortnight, which is 2 weeks if you don't know that. Because this is Poe, and he's just like that. That's all. Alright. The telescope. So this is back to the astronomer and Rose, so this would be like the original sisters, I guess. And this is like basically her stolen work. So she's like looking into the telescope and telling him what she sees, and he's writing it all down or whatever. So in between all of these, Rose is also speaking of visions she's seeing, which are all implied to be her and Pearl, particularly the final one the final one is referring to the Rose who's searching for the bear items, which is also the same Rose singing this song. Hopefully you guys are understanding how this thing works now. We have Tango Dancer next, and this one's really pretty. This is another scene and then a song. Very much it mirrors Camera Shop. It's again Rose coming into a shop, but this time the shopkeeper that greets her is Scheherazade. So Rose asks if she is ancient, and then consequently asks for stardust, creating an almost paradox from our line back in back in Camera Shop of she stole stardust from an ancient she pretended to care. So it's like she heard that and then subsequently went to do it, even though it would have already been done. We love how this show works. It's absolutely great. And Scheherazade states that Rose reminds her of her sister, Dunyazad, but that Dunyazad has been dead for a long time. We've got Monk. So, this is an interruption of Scheherazade's storytelling. Dunyazad has been listening to the stories and asks how it's possible that Rose Red stole the Star Child, because Lady Usher would obviously have a security system. And her response is that they were outside in a park. There's also some other conversation in this song, but it's not important. I'm literally just trying to get like the important points so you can understand what is going on. And there's a lot going on. So you can listen to the soundtrack yourself after this, obviously, and then find out what is going on. The two sisters dance, and Scheherazade asks if Dunyazad remembers a time before this, when they weren't sisters. Dunyazad says that no, not yet, but that she's getting there. Side 3, track 1. So, Lights Out is the first track in this side, and it's back to 7-year-old Roxy, and it's simply her just asking for a bedtime story from Lady Usher. It's really short and sweet. There's not too much to it. Yeah. The photograph. So it starts off with the question of how did Rose lose her camera? And we hear the response, she threw it to the ground, disgusted by what she had done. When prompted further, we are told she took a photograph instead of being a hero, and the photograph was of a ghost. This is what happened during Subway, telling us that those events happened before Camera Shop. Things start to jump around a lot, so we're going to the next song, which is Bad Men, and this is back to Scheherazade. I know it's jumping around a lot, but this side is what connects everything together that we've heard. So, back to Scheherazade. She's telling the story of Rose to Dunyazad and the Shah, but since it is morning, she will tell no more. The Shah states that he will miss her when he kills her, and she asks how he will grieve. He states he will throw a great giant feast. I'm so sorry, that was awful. And then he'll go up to his room, stating he'll stay there for 42 years and go mad, alluding to this being the same guy who could see ghosts referred to back in The Astronomer over in Side 2. That's why I made a big deal about that quote, because it's this dude. After this, the song cuts back to Rose's story and her discovery of the astronomer-loving Pearl, her sister, and she then goes to the bear with his requested items, because now she has all 4 items. But he says he just wanted some honey and he wasn't going to do her bidding, and that she was literally crazy. Which, I mean, yeah, she asked a bear to help with her revenge plot, so he might be onto something there. Usher Part 3. I have an entire page of handwritten notes for this one because it's a 7-minute long song. So. The fool has left, placing this after Fathers and Sons. Usher awakes upright in bed as his wife knocks at the door, stating in terror that she can hear Roxy below them. Usher states that Lady Usher has gone mad and only reading stories can calm her. He pulls a book from the shelf, and the book goes over the events of Subway, but with more detail. We are told that the game that Pearl was playing on her phone had a boss that she was fighting, which was a bear. Remember the line back from Fathers and Sons, and if anyone pushes me, I'm gonna push them back? Well, remember, that's all the same character. It's Brent. So when Pearl attacks the bear in the game, the bear, pusher, fool, literally pushes her back. Simultaneously, in the Usher household, Roxy has made her way out of the vault, and we are given the line, and the dead girl leapt upon her mother, and her sister, and her daughter, and her lover. And essentially, Lady Usher dies from fright. As this happens, it cuts to Pearl being pushed in front of the subway train, and she says she saw Rose back from the dead, standing there with her camera. And then she states that she knows she's going to die, and she thinks of someone she loves very much, smiling in bed, holding a teddy bear. This is alluding to Roxy. And then she let the train rip through her. And yeah, that's how that went. We have one final song in side 3, and it's called Prayer. And this is each of the characters working to forgive themselves for the problems they caused to the others, as they state, for forgive myself for living in the dark, for not remembering, for not being in my body. There's a bunch of other stuff in that song too, but those are some of the main ones that I thought really drove at it, was the main thing. Okay, side 4. This is the final side. This is it. We're almost there, guys. So, the first one is Hero, and it's Rose, now kind of understanding her past lifetimes, understanding the story that the shopkeeper, Pearl, has just told her, realizing how much pain she caused Pearl, and she doesn't know how she could have changed anything either, because that's, what her whole character was always driven on revenge in every single lifetime. That's who she was. The next one is Midnight, which is a convergence of the 4 characters, now that Rose has regained her memories, as Pearl explains to her who all she really was. Rose asks Dave if he remembers when they would go in his treehouse and look at the stars, but he says he doesn't think that's happened yet. Yet another display of time. And then finally, this is it. I know it's really short, but we have The Wind and Rain, which is back to the story of Rose and Pearl, and how the fiddle, talked about back in Camera Shop, came into existence. So that's the show. I hope that made sense. I really hope that made sense, because that was a lot of talking. But yeah, hopefully everything connected well. And again, so now that I've finished actually with the summary, I'm gonna give my own thoughts on this show. In case you can't tell, I really like this show. I think it's very creative, and I have no clue what Dave Malloy was on when he wrote it, but, yeah. Just the absolute creativity of it all is amazing. The fact that he took, all of these source materials and weaved them together, and it's just so creative because of the actors playing all their own instruments, all these different characters. It's just a really cool show, and there isn't much moving around because, again, they all have the instruments, so they're sitting in the corners. Gelzy and Britton are up on the stage, and there's just a lot going on, and it's so good. Again, when you first listen to it, you have no clue what's going on, but after that, it's really, really good, and that's what I appreciate so much about this show, is that once you get it, it's amazing. So yeah, that's it, and I'll probably do another summary. Not a summary. You only really need a summary for this show because you don't know what's going on. But definitely more reviews, because I've seen a lot of shows, I've listened to a lot of shows, and I enjoy doing this, and I hope you all also enjoy hearing thoughts. So that's it. See you next time, hopefully.